commissions to at least every 5 years, but sooner than that if there is a reason to update the regional master plan, or regional planning for each one of the defined regions in the state. And we have over the last, it's been a while now, how many months, I'm sure Tara will tell us how many months this process was involved in, but the staff has been diligently working on this and pulling it together. It is online under the Southwest Region Planning Commission at the website. I encourage you to look at it, especially if you don't want to lug this around with you. But there's a lot of material in here. The regional plan includes various attachments that the Planning Commission has been working on over the years. So what we're going to do at this point is Tara from the staff is going to provide a presentation of the draft plan. Yeah, hold on one second. Oh, sorry, point of order?
Question, are you giving out those?
No.
Oh.
Sorry.
Can you get them out?
You can get them. They're online. I'm sure we can digitize them, right, and give people the discs and that kind of thing.
Copies of, I have about 7 CDs that I could give to
Okay, and we can
make more.
we can make more if necessary, rather than killing down too many trees in this process. But what Tara's going to do is present an overview of the regional plan and the documents that are involved in it. After Tara has completed her review, I'm going to allow the board an opportunity to ask some questions with respect to that for Tara, and then we'll open it up to public comments and questions on it. I appreciate it if you keep your comments succinct. If you have an individual that's already made the comment that you're thinking about making, then, you know, if you would refrain from having to follow up on that again, and maybe grab a chocolate chip cookie up front rather than doing that. But we'll have everybody who wants to speak given the opportunity to speak. And at the end of the process, we'll see what we do with it. Okay?
Okay.
All right, Tara, go ahead.
Thanks.
Just a
Oh,
quick,
yes. Yes?
could you tell me who is on the board?
Sure, we can go
Thank
around and
you.
do an introduction. My name's Tom Mullins. I'm the chairman, and I'm from Peterborough. From Brian, if you'd like to go
I'm
around.
Brian Fouché, so I'm from Harrisville.
Larry Robbins from Town of Marlborough.
Butch Moran from Richmond.
Gus Lorano from Swansea.
Robin Peard-Blaze from Fitzwilliam.
Ben Davis from Walpole.
Ed Merrill from Jaffrey.
Elaine Lovelock from Chesterfield.
Okay, good. And the only other thing that I'm going to actually require is, if you have a question for staff or something like that, please direct all of your comments and the questions through myself. I'm acting as the chair, and if necessary, we'll direct it to the individual at that point that may need to be able to
Chair.
answer the question. Yes.
Yes, I'm wondering, I'm counting heads, and after introductions of your group, there are not too many citizens left. I'm wondering why 3:30 on a workday was the time chosen. If the
Sir, I'm going to...
the object
Sir,
is
please.
transparency.
Sir, please. If it's a point of order question, I'm happy to answer that. If you'd like to make that comment when you get up, when it's time for you
It's
to
a
speak,
question, not a comment.
then you can do that. And right at this point, the public notice was put out. Statute requires that we do that. We did that.
All right.
Here's the hearing date and time at this point. So, Tara, would you like to go?
Sure, thank you. So, my name is Tara Drummond. I'm a senior planner here at Southwest Region Planning Commission. And the focus of our presentation, as many of you are already aware, is on Monadnock Region Future. It's been a project that we've been working on for the past 3 years, and it's a long-range plan for the future of Southwest New Hampshire. But before I get started, just make sure my clicker works. I just want to give a brief overview of the region and the organization itself. So we, when we say Southwest Region, we're referring to 34 communities in Southwest New Hampshire, and that involves all of Cheshire County, communities in the western part of Hillsborough County, and one community in Sullivan County, that's Langdon. And Southwest Region Planning Commission is a membership organization of those communities. Communities can voluntarily be members of the commission. We provide technical planning assistance to municipal boards and other organizations on topics like transportation planning, land use planning, etc. We also provide coordination on larger than local issues. So many of our towns don't have full-time planning staff, so we provide assistance to them in that capacity as they request our assistance. But we also help on matters like transportation, which extends beyond town boundaries. So we help provide coordination between towns and those issues. And we're advisory. I think that's an important thing to note, especially in the context of a regional plan, unlike your local master plans or your town's planning boards, which have regulatory authority, we, Planning Commission, don't. We just provide guidance and advice as our communities request it. So that's a little bit about us, a little bit about the project. It started in 2012, in early 2012. The 9 regional planning commissions received a grant from the Sustainable Communities Initiative, which was a partnership of the U.S. Department of Transportation, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, and the Department of Housing and Urban Development. And what was unique about this grant for us, the focus was to enhance regional planning efforts, but it also focused on integrated planning. So looking at the connections between transportation, land use, housing, the environment, et cetera. So we could look at all of those factors together. It also focused on enhanced public outreach, and that was a great opportunity for us because we wanted to reach out to people that we don't normally see at town meetings and meet them where they're at. So we held a number of conversations and focus groups that I'll talk about. It was also a statewide partnership. So while the focus of the project was on the Monadnock region or the Southwest region, it was also a coordination amongst the 9 regional planning commissions. We worked with state agencies and other partners to share information to help make the process more efficient. And finally, it was a 3-year scope. So we started in 2012, and we are wrapping up the project, which ends in December of this year. So at the end of the year, it'll end. And a little bit about our planning process. We begin by engaging representatives from across the region, so individuals to serve as advisors to the planning process on a leadership team. And those advisors met on a quarterly basis, and they provided insight into how things were going with the plan, their thoughts on how we should reach out to the public, and just served as resources to us. So once we formed our leadership team, we began an extensive outreach effort. We also began looking at and analyzing conditions and trends impacting the region. We worked with our leadership team, taking the results from that outreach and from our research, and formed a vision and goals and objectives for the region. We also identified some implementation strategies to advance those goals and objectives, and we've prepared a draft regional plan, which is the focus of this hearing today, which has been available for a little bit over a month online, and that's been available for the public to look at and provide comment. The final step is adopting the plan, so making final edits and incorporating comments from the public, and adopting the plan for the region. So I'm just going to give a brief overview of our outreach efforts, and then we'll jump into the plan content. So a significant portion of the planning process was really reaching out to people in conversations and asking them what do they like best about the region and what could be better. And we felt like people who live in their communities and work in those communities are really the experts on those questions. So we engaged over 500 residents in direct conversation. So people who live here, people who have also worked here, through a number of different formats. So we held neighborhood conversations, which was, for instance, meeting with the senior group at a senior lunch site and asking, really the focus of those conversations was those two questions. What do you like best and what could be better? So for all of these events that I'm going to list, that was what we asked people. So we had these neighborhood conversations with seniors, with young professionals, with students, with families, with working parents. We went to fairs and events. We went to over 17 fairs and festivals and asked those questions. We placed boxes in every community, which were just suggestion boxes that people could write anonymously or provide their name if they wanted to about around answering those questions. We also looked at every community's master plan. Most master plans have a vision section or a vision statement, and we reviewed them to see what those priorities are in local master plans. And we conducted a household survey through the UNH Survey Center that was a statistically significant survey. And we also held 7 topic-oriented focus groups, which were bringing together individuals from around the region, organizations, and other representatives who had more insight into topics like transportation. So we held transportation, energy, housing, working landscapes, economic development, etc., focus groups. And all of these were, if they were meetings, they were all open to the public. So what do we find from that? We got a lot of feedback, but we found some interesting trends or themes that ran throughout all of the questions that we asked. The number one thing about what people liked best about the region overwhelmingly was community. It's the people who live here. It's that sense of neighborliness. They feel safe in their community. There's a sense of local control and local decision making. There's a strong sense of community involvement and engagement, and that's either what attracted them to the region or their town, or that's what kept them there and sustained them there. There's also a strong appreciation for our landscape, our mountains, our rivers, our clean air. There's a sense that there's a lot of access to outdoor recreation and opportunity for accessing trails, accessing bike paths, getting to your downtown pretty easily if you live near a village center. And for our natural resources, so protecting our air, protecting our water. What could be better? Overwhelmingly, we heard that there's a need for greater economic opportunity, the need for more jobs of well-paying jobs and for jobs of a diverse skill set. There's also a need for greater options for how you get to and from places. So the need for choices in travel. So maybe you can't drive your own car or can't access goods and services very easily. So having more access. And also for protecting that sense of community. So ensuring that our small towns still have opportunities for civic engagement and social engagement. And for resource management. So while we care a lot about our air and our water, we want to make sure that it's maintained over time. So drawing from our outreach and what we heard, we worked with our leadership team to develop a vision for the region. And that's really a guiding statement for what we'd like to see the region look like in the next 20 years. And that vision is so that the Southwest region will be a place where thriving communities, rich in culture, educational opportunities, natural resources work together to support a resilient and robust regional economy which offers residents freedom of choice and embraces our heritage and distinct sense of place. So, so we organized our plan, drawing from the outreach that I mentioned. We organized our plan and the data that we collected and the research that we did on trends and conditions. We decided to organize our plan around 4 theme areas, those being community vitality, so ensuring that our communities are still vibrant places for all people of ages and abilities to live. Economic prosperity, so addressing that need for more economic opportunity. Stewardship, so caring for and protecting and managing our natural resources. And preparedness. And this last theme is really related to the need to ensure that our response capacity in natural or man-made emergencies or disasters is adequate and that our region is resilient to potential threats in the future. So I'm just going to go through some key trends and conditions that we identified around those 4 theme areas and note some of the objectives that are included in the plan related to those themes. And then I'm going to highlight some of the strategies, just examples of strategies that we identified to address those objective areas. So just starting with community vitality, what we found is that there's a trend of slowing population growth in our region. So that in the next 30 years, it's based on projections offered by the New Hampshire Office of Energy and Planning. It's projected that our population is going to increase by only 6%, and that's compared to a 30% increase in population between 1980 and 2010. Our region's also aging. So despite slower population growth overall, the population over the age of 64 is expected to increase from 15% to 26% in the next 30 years. But we're also losing our younger adults, also known as our working age population. In the past decade, the number of 24 to 39-year-olds in the region has decreased by 14%. And we're also seeing declining school enrollment. So the drops in children, this is a trend that we're experiencing statewide, but in our region, so between the 2005 and 2013 school years, student enrollment dropped by 17% in the region. That's compared to a statewide decline of 11%. So some of the objectives that we identified or it's really like mini goals that we identified to address those trends, or to recognize those trends, and to support and grow our sense of community vitality, are to expand the array of housing options. So to ensure that the supply of housing is affordable and meets the needs and preferences of multiple generations, diverse abilities, and a range of income levels. And I want to be clear that when I state these objectives, these are goals set out there for any community, for any organization to take on if they so choose. So also to enhance access to goods, services, and other destinations, to be sure that we're providing safe and convenient options for people of all abilities to access goods, services, places of employment, education, healthcare, etc. To increase opportunities for social and civic engagement, to promote opportunities that foster relationship building and involve a variety of sectors and populations. The second theme area, economic prosperity, some of the trends that we identified in this theme area include a slow economic recovery. So between 2007 and 2009, as most of you are aware, the nation experienced the most severe economic downturn since the Great Depression. Although we fared it better than the state and most of the country, it's left a lasting impression. So while our average annual unemployment rate was 5.1% in 2013, it's remained consistently lower than the state of the nation, but it's still 1.8 percentage points higher than its pre-recession low of 3.3% in 2006. Other trends observed include a declining manufacturing sector and the loss of locally owned business. Between 2004 and 2014, Cheshire County manufacturing jobs decreased by 22%. That's a total of 1,262 jobs. Some of the objectives that we identified to address these trends and to address the need for greater economic prosperity include the need to build a skilled and educated workforce. So ensure that our residents and employees have access to the education, skills, and support services necessary to succeed and thrive. Also to retain, grow, and attract business and industry. So ensure that we have a diverse base of industry that provides opportunities for growth and workforce development. And to maintain adequate infrastructure. So ensure that our infrastructure, such as broadband, transportation, roads, bridges, etc., is high quality and can safely and reliably connect people with and provide convenient access to employment, goods, services, and other destinations. So some of the stewardship trends that we recognize are trends related to caring for our cultural and natural resources, include fragmentation and loss of resources to development. Although we haven't experienced the same degree of growth as other parts of New Hampshire, our resources like forests, drinking water, and farmland are still vulnerable to land use activities and development pressure. In 2012, there were 62% fewer acres of land and farms and 1,150 fewer farms in Cheshire County than there were in 1940. We're also experiencing non-point source pollution. This is a nationwide issue. The more developed a watershed is, the greater risk there is to water quality. So non-point source pollution contributes to over 90% of water pollution in New Hampshire. And this occurs when natural and human-made pollutants are carried by stormwater into lakes, rivers, and groundwater as the water flows over the surface of the earth. There's also issues with air quality as a result of non-point source pollution. Invasive species have become a significant concern or issue within our region, within the state and the nation. The introduction of non-native plants, animals, and diseases has become a significant environmental and economic problem. Not only do they displace natural plants, animals, reduce wildlife habitat, impact water quality, and damage our farms and forests, in our region we're experiencing an increase of invasives in the form of hemlock woolly delegate, which has infested more than half of our towns, and variable milfoil, which has been found in 9 water bodies in our region. Some of the objectives that we identified related to stewardship or to ensuring that our resources are managed and cared for responsibly include inventorying and monitoring the availability and condition of natural, cultural, and historic resources. preserving and protecting the integrity and availability of important resources through conservation, encouraging communities, organizations, citizens, and others to work in coordination when planning for resource management and protection. And finally, the last theme, preparedness. Some of the trends that we identified relative to preparedness include severe storm events and climate change. So extreme weather events like heat waves, storms, and floods have increased over the past few decades in the region and are only expected to worsen in the future. Since 1953, approximately 53% of major disaster declarations from FEMA for severe storm and flooding in the state have occurred in the past decade. Damage from just 3 of these floods, the October 2005 flood, April 2006, and May 2007, have totaled $60 million in damages. Data from the region's long-term meteorological, oh gosh, that's a hard one. You know what I mean. Stage
The weather
15
people.
indicates that our climate is getting warmer and we are experiencing more precipitation. It's estimated that these trends will continue into the future and could have an impact on public health through increases in heat injuries, allergies, asthma, and the spread of vector-borne diseases. Vulnerable infrastructure. Much of our stormwater and roadway infrastructure, like culverts and bridges, are aging or are in need of repair. Some of this infrastructure doesn't have the capacity to handle the severe storms and flooding we've experienced in recent years. Also, events like the ice storm in 2008 severely damaged our transmission infrastructure by downing power and telephone lines and leaving parts of the region without power for days. Limited supply of resources. It's estimated that New Hampshire only has a 5 to 10 day reserve of food. The vast majority of this food is trucked or shipped in from other states and countries. Similarly, the region's largely dependent on outside energy sources. So a question to be asked is, what would we do in the event of a long-term power outage or disruption in our fuel supply? Some of the objectives that we identified related to preparedness include routinely assessing our capacity to meet the needs of the region's populations in the event of an emergency or disaster, working at the community and regional level to plan for potential disasters and emergencies, and ensuring that we have the infrastructure in place needed to supply resources such as food and water in an emergency or disaster, maintain secure channels of communication, and withstand the threats of climate change and other potential disaster situations. So implementation, we identified a number, about 100 different strategies to address or to advance the objectives that I just went through in the presentation, as well as the goals and the vision identified for the plan. Those are, I'm just going to give a few examples since there are so many to highlight what the strategies look like around each theme area. So some of our community vitality strategies include repairing or rehabilitating residential structures to be more energy efficient and or accommodate the needs of elderly or persons with disabilities. So we're seeing that there's, as our population is aging, the need to be more flexible in our housing stock. So communities might consider allowing for accessory dwelling units so that an in-law, a family could have multiple generations living in their home at one time. Another strategy, support and expand programs that offer services for healthy aging and aging in place. That also addresses that issue of our aging population, ensuring that there are resources in place to accommodate their needs. And some examples of organizations already doing that work in the region include ServiceLink, Monadnock at Home, and Monadnock RSVP. Economic prosperity strategies. Some examples include strengthening coordination and collaboration among businesses, educational institutions, and partners to meet workforce training needs. This is already happening in our region, and our plan notes the need to maybe strengthen those partnerships. So there's the Regional Center for Advanced Manufacturing in Keene. That's just one example. Also, another strategy would be to promote and expand programs and facilities that support small and emerging businesses, such as business incubators, maker spaces, shared commercial kitchens, etc. What's a theme with all those examples is that there's spaces for entrepreneurs or small businesses to access resources and share the cost of those resources rather than having to provide those costs up front on their own. So the goal is really to help small businesses emerge and sustain themselves over time. Stewardship strategies, to develop and implement conservation strategies that protect and manage the region's natural resources, such as prime agricultural soils, open space, important forest soils, riparian corridors, and wildlife habitat. There's a lot of conservation work happening in our region right now, and so that's encouraging organizations to develop a strategy in place so that that type of conservation is done with a strategy guiding it. Also, to identify funding mechanisms to support historic and cultural preservation efforts. Some preparedness strategies to strengthen efforts to develop a local food hub, establishing the required processing and warehousing facilities and the transportation systems needed to support it. Another example is to establish and support programs that involve youth and volunteer firefighting and emergency response services. There's a concern that as our population ages, as we're losing our younger population, that we won't have our volunteer response capacity, the same level of response capacity as we've had in previous generations. So, that's an overview of the plan, the regional plan content itself. In addition to developing a regional plan, we also updated and developed a number of supporting plan documents, and that's why the plan is so long. Some of you have asked why is it so long in its entirety. Really, the regional plan itself is about 100 pages, and the supporting plan documents I'm going to list include a housing plan, a long-range transportation plan, a natural resource plan, comprehensive economic development strategy, a broadband plan. We did some scenario planning exercises. We also included in the plan a summary of our outreach efforts, so you could see all of our summary of all the comments that we received from reaching out to those 500 plus individuals in the region. What are the benefits of a regional plan? It's a tool for communities in developing their own local plan and coordinating with one another. It addresses issues that go beyond municipal boundaries. It's a resource for communities and others to identify ways to address issues of common concern. And it provides a picture of what residents and communities value, what they want for the future and ideas for getting there. This is an overview of our leadership team who helped us and provide guidance throughout the process. And next steps, we're going to be seeking adoption of the regional plan. Once it is adopted, or if it is adopted, at that point we will print and release the final plan. And we're developing a web resource to disseminate some of the content on this plan and make it more easy for towns to access the information. So that's the conclusion of my presentation. I guess now I'll turn it over to you, Tom.
All right, good, thank you.
Thank you, Tara.
Turn the lights on, that was
Yep.
good, succinct. Appreciate that.
A lot of stuff.
Put my sunglasses on. And does that have to stay on, or can you kill it at this point? Yeah, that'd be good.
Thank you.
About
Yeah.
that.
All right, now, before we open up for public comment, I want to see if there are any clarification questions from the board for Tara with respect to the presentation. Keep in mind, the board will have an opportunity to discuss it in some more detail after the public comment period is concluded, and we're going to decide what to do at that point. So right now, I'm going to open it up for some clarification questions if there are any. If not, then we will go to the public. No? All right, good. We'll still have an opportunity at the end. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question.
No, ma'am, I'm gonna call people for public comment, so that'll be fine, okay? Before we get into that, at this point, if there are no questions now, please keep in mind that we will have an opportunity to discuss. If there are questions, we can direct them to staff at that point. I'm going to open it up to public comment. I'm gonna ask each individual to please, when I call on you, have a stand up. And if you have a question or a comment, it'd be easier if you could come down here so we don't have to crane. We'll ask you to keep your comments, no longer than 5 minutes, if that's good for you, please. We have a number of people here that may want to talk. Please address your comments up to the chair. If we can't answer the question this evening for some reason, we'll certainly provide an opportunity to get that information back to people. And then when you're finished, please sit down and we'll call on the next person. And as I said earlier, if the comment has been made already, and feel free not to feel like you need to do it again. So, I'm going to take people in order. Ma'am, you were the first one that raised your hand. If you'd like to come up here, and we would like to ask you to state your name and where you're from, just so we know who's here in the room.
Well, the first, you asked for Ann Cartwright, Alstead, New Hampshire.
Sure.
We own a tree farm in Alstead, New Hampshire. one of the first questions I have is, you said there were only 500 people that were queried, or are the others all organizations, or?
But we engaged.
Ma'am, as I said, if you wouldn't mind, please,
Oh,
if you'd
sorry.
like to have a seat or direct your comments through here, I'm sure Tara can hear what the question is, and then we'll address them. Tim may have to answer that question. But if
Okay.
you would please address your comments this
Well,
way.
I just, now you can take it.
Yes.
I have-
So, your question was essentially the number of people that were involved in the review of this process?
Right, because she only said 500 people, and so the other things that were presented, I did not understand how many other people were involved.
Okay, so your question, I think, is were there more than the 500 people involved that the surveys and participated in this process? Is that right?
Well, yes, I'd
Yes,
like to know
okay.
the total number.
Tara?
Sure, to clarify, the 500 figure was related to the direct number of individuals that we engaged in conversation who live in the region. So that was through those fairs and festivals, comment cards that we received, etc. We did a household survey that's not factored into that 500 number. That reached out to over 2,000 people statewide. There was also oversampling done in our region of about 200 households. And then there were a number of organizations, leadership team members, public events that we had where anyone was welcome to attend. And I don't have that specific number, but we have about 15 people serving on our leadership team.
Good, thank you. Further, ma'am?
Yes, further on that question. So only in our area, how many surveys were sent out, and why wasn't a survey sent to everyone?
Tara, can you answer that? Or?
Sure, so statewide, there were, I don't know the exact figure, maybe Tim knows off the top of his head, of the number of households surveyed in the UNH survey, but there was an additional 200 surveys of households in the western part of New Hampshire. A survey wasn't sent out to every household because it wasn't needed for a statistically significant sample, nor was there funding in place to do so.
Good, thank you.
So
Further, ma'am?
how was that sample determined then?
Tim?
Well, it's, the UNH Survey Center is the entity that conducted the survey, and they use their metrics in order to make sure that what they find is statistically valid set. So they are the experts in doing that kind of work, and so we defer to them.
Okay, and you don't know how many in our area actually received these, in our Southwest Regional Planning?
This was a telephone survey that was conducted, and as Tara said, there were a couple of hundred.
That's, okay, so that's it. All right. Now, another question I have is concerning the, I agree with a number of things you said about the economic, that we certainly need to promote good businesses that will pay good salaries, that a lot of these problems would be addressed by individuals if there were the good paying jobs that there used to be in the area. Another question is towards the, well, I could let, this was really my husband's question. I should
You better let him answer.
I better let him do it.
All right, good.
So that's it right now, but I would like, if there's anything else, I'll let you know.
Yeah, just to clarify on that, we will go around the room, give everybody an opportunity to speak at least once, and then if there are follow-up comments people may want to make, we'll certainly do that. Yes?
Jim McConnell, Swansea. You're talking about the labor force, and I'm wondering what you've done with respect to apprenticeship programs. The reason I'm asking that is because South Carolina has a very innovative apprenticeship program that they have used. Now, they have larger corporations down there, and many of them have because they've attracted a number of German companies, the German attitude with respect to apprenticeships. But none of those seem to cost the state of South Carolina anything, and they're all funded by the corporations. Most of the programs that I sense, and I'm not positive of this obviously, that you're talking about require increased outlays, increased funds, which we simply don't have. So I'm wondering what you've done in the area of apprenticeships in the way of looking at things that might offer innovative solutions similar to what South Carolina's done.
Thank you. Are you finished, sir?
I've got another question when you're done with that.
Yeah, no, just to to say that, I think that was an excellent question. I've been following that myself with respect to what's happening down there. Seems to me that given the age of limited public resources, we really do need to be thinking about doing that. I don't know if anybody else has heard the reports that have been coming out on the radio with respect to those programs, but they sound very innovative.
Right.
You know, people have an opportunity to come on board, they learn, they get paid while they're learning. The corporation, the company that they're working for pays them while they're learning. You know,
And while
gives
they're going
people
to school.
an opportunity to do it. Yeah, while they're going to school. Gives them an opportunity to come in and learn a skill and a trade without first having to expend a lot of money at the local college or community school or tech school. So I'm firmly on board with that comment. I think that's an interesting comment. We'll take a look.
So have you guys,
No, I don't believe that we have specific.
well, I'd like to
Tara,
suggest.
Tara, why don't you go ahead, because I didn't see it in the plan. No,
Thanks.
go ahead.
So the plan does address the need for more apprenticeship opportunities. It addresses what's currently in place today, but beyond that, it doesn't propose specific strategies or funding mechanisms to get there. I think that's why we included it as one of our strategies, so that we could put it out to the community to explore that issue further. But I agree with Tom that that's a great, not only question, but I've written down notes about what South Carolina's doing for us to follow up on.
Right. Well, of course, the beauty of it is that it doesn't cost the town, the county, and the state anything. That the companies bear this cost and are happy to do it. So obviously, that's the direction that I'd like to see us go.
Certainly, we'll take that comment into consideration before we make any final decisions on this.
I have another question.
Certainly.
Who approves the master plan or the regional plan?
Ultimately, once this process is finished, it'll be presented to this body to take a vote on whether or not to approve.
This body?
Yes.
Nobody from the state?
No,
Nobody
it's
from the
it's
county?
the Southwest Region Planning Commission's plan. Each one of the planning commissions around the state has to go through a similar process, not all at the same time. It sounds like everybody's doing it all at the same time as you. But it's up to the planning commission to make a determination as to whether to approve or not.
And then I assume that nothing in the planning commission's approval would obligate the county or the state to do anything?
No, that's exactly right. So, totally advisory, correct?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay.
Question, Ed?
Yeah, I want to mention that RCAM is talking along those lines.
RCAM.
Regional Center for Advanced Manufacturing.
Okay.
RCAM is supported by many of the businesses in the area, the larger businesses.
Mhm.
And they all have the same problem of coming up with qualified individuals to hire. And so they are actively thinking of talking about programs to address that issue. So there's something in the works here.
Okay, well, that's good. You know, my own sense of things is the principal problem for us in this region is frankly the fact that we're no longer competitive. 20 years ago, there was an article, a very famous article written by Stephen Moore, who was an economist at the time at the Cato Institute and is now a columnist for the Wall Street Journal and a commentator on TV, basically saying that New Hampshire has no business being in New England because its performance is so completely out of step with the rest of New England, which really should be part of Texas. That was 20 years ago when a lot has changed. But as long as we're the third worst business tax, as long as we're paying the third worst business profits tax, as long as we're paying the 8th worst unemployment insurance and the 9th worst real estate taxes, we got a problem.
There's another chair.
No, good, thank you, appreciate the comment.
Can I,
Yes?
to your first question,
Sure.
there is a case study written up in the document on Warwick Mills, and that's a project that sponsored.
Warwick Mills?
Yes, that sponsored an apprenticeship program. We are sharing that in the plan to be a model for others because it was, as you say, in the South Carolina model, paid for by the company.
Yeah, well, I think that's a key component of any plan you come up with, because that's going to be easy to sell. And that, it seems to me, makes a lot of sense.
Good, thank you for your comments, appreciate that. All right, next. Yes, sir, I saw your hand last time, go right ahead.
Yes, Joe Carvey from Malstead. I read through a lot of the plan online. It's quite lengthy, quite detailed. Question came to my mind is, since you're advisory board, how's this plan going to be implemented?
Go ahead, Tim.
Well, it's a tool for our communities. We are a membership organization. We serve 34 municipalities in the Monadnock region. And they, as you know, communities have this as a document that they can turn to as a resource. We also would like to think that other stakeholders in the future of our region would be interested in the document as well. So it could be private and other public entities that might look at it, institutions if you will. It could be chambers of commerce, whoever could look at the document as providing some worthwhile information and direction for what they want to accomplish.
So I take it that funding will come from grants from different federal agencies to implement some of these portions?
Well, that's up to Congress. You know, we don't know that. This was our opportunity to take advantage of funds that would allow us to do some good planning. But in terms of implementation, that's going to be contingent upon, you know, what folks in the community feel its relevance is. The guidance in the document, is it relevant to their communities or not? And for maybe some of the bigger ticket items, what you're describing, you know, future funding, but whether or not that will be available, we don't know.
Now, can I ask another question?
Certainly.
In your transportation section, all the data just says Cheshire County. What about the other 14 towns in Hillsborough? That data wasn't included, and in that data, you talk about corridors and feeder routes to the corridors for buses, and taking the present day, there's 1.85 cars per household, and you're projecting 1.65 15 years down the road, and that savings of money is going to be, 50% of that savings is going to be used for infrastructure, 20% for pathways. Where's all that money come from?
So I think we want to be careful and correct that record. So I'm going to turn to JB.
So
JB, if you would identify yourself for people who don't know who you are.
Sure, I'm JB Mack. I'm principal planner and work in transportation and brownfield specifically with the Planning Commission. I think what you're referring to is the scenario planning document. There is a long-range transportation plan that accounts for the entire region, and there are corridors for, it goes into Hillsborough County, goes up into Langley. But I think what you're talking about is there's a transportation scenario as part of the scenario planning document. What that is really just a what-if document. You know, that we've heard a lot from the community that there's not a lot of transportation choices in the region, especially for people that are non-drivers. It became a big issue for us because of our aging population and looking at, we know from national statistics that 1 in 5 households where the head of the household is 65 or over does not drive. And for rural communities, that's probably going to be an issue. So what we did with the scenario was to look at, well, how, I mean, we don't really have public transit here in New Hampshire. Right now, until they have self-driving vehicles or, you know, come up with some better technology, it's kind of one of the alternatives that is commonly looked at to get people that can't drive around, especially for long distances. The reason we looked at Cheshire County only is because that was a data set that we had. We were looking at motor vehicles registered, the registered motor vehicles, and the data set that we had available was only on a county basis, so we had to stick to that. We didn't have numbers of registered vehicles by town in order to do our analysis, so we decided to look at Cheshire County only. And it's for illustrative purposes. It's not for, we're not suggesting that it happen. It's a way to sort of, it's an exercise in understanding possibilities.
Well,
Thank you. Yes, sir.
I'm still confused about the savings. You mentioned in that document, 1.85 cars going to be reduced, and you got money being saved.
Yep.
Where's that money come from being saved?
Yeah, go ahead, JB.
Okay, so if you look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics, every year they come up with something called the Consumer Expenditure Survey, where they get a statistically significant sample of what people actually spend on a daily basis in their lives. And so they break it down by housing, transportation, food, entertainment, and so on. The average amount that a household pays on transportation today in America is a little over $9,000. And most of that is on vehicle expenses. About 90% of it is vehicle expenses on an average basis. So what we did was say, well, what if you didn't pay for, each person buying a vehicle on their own? What if we were somehow able to, I could work with my, share something with a neighbor or whatever, have a public transit system and just spend my money on transportation for that purpose. What we said in the scenario was that take 50% of your savings of not spending on the vehicle, put it towards discretionary income, put it towards your retirement, put it towards education, whatever investment in your house. And then the other 50%, what if we invested that into public transit, bike paths, sidewalks? And we took real costs and looked at real inflation rates and looked out to, I believe it was 2035, to determine what would that actually pay for if we, a certain segment of the population decided to do that. And that's what we were trying to illustrate with the scenario, the planning exercise.
So in other words, you're saying that proposed tax to get that 50%.
No,
No,
sir.
it's not about taxes.
It's
actually
all it
about
is,
household
JB, if you don't mind.
expenses. Yeah, sure, no.
It's okay, it's not that. All it is was you have discretionary income. If you're not spending it on your car, maybe you're spending it on something else. That's all.
That's right.
We're not proposing that anybody pay any more money. If you want to buy 2 cars, go right ahead. All right, good. Thank you very much. Yes, sir, in the back.
My name is Greg Butko. I'm from Richmond. One thing I never hear anybody talk about is sustainable freedom. This country, the last 100 years, taxes keep going up and our freedom keeps going down. I left Connecticut 3 years ago to get away from that. I can't get away from Washington, but
Sir,
I got away from
I understand your comments, but how do they relate to this?
Well, I'll tell you how they relate to this. That man there just spoke about public transportation as a viable alternative to a private car. Well, this is true, but if it's viable in a particular town, we don't need regional planning or the town to get involved, because if we're going to subsidize it, that means everybody's going to pay for it, even those people not using it. If it is viable economically, then we would have it. We would have it now. We'd have bus service now. We'd have train service. The idea that we're going to put something in that can't support itself means that everybody else is going to pay for it.
Well,
So
keeping in mind, sir, that this is not a plan that presents any particular thing for anybody to do.
Well, the concept is
Purely advisory, that's exactly right, just purely
Well, yeah, but when
advisory.
you're advising, who's going to pay for all this stuff?
Well, if I suppose back to your position, if the community decides as a community that they want to fund it, then I suppose that's up to that
Well, if the
community.
community decides, why do we need a regional planning commission?
Well, the Regional Planning Commission can give you the plan and say you can do it or not. But we're here to talk about whether the plan should be adopted or not, that's all at this
But
point.
everything you're talking about involves more government and higher taxes. Everything.
Good, thank you.
Well, I mean.
We're not in, it's not a debate, he's entitled to his position. Thank you
Okay,
very
well, no,
much.
but I mean, how does everybody else feel about this? You want to pay more taxes and you want less freedom? If that's what you want.
Then I guess we'll see whether the communities adopt any of the things in the plan.
Okay?
Good, thank you very much. Yes, sir.
Larry Cleveland, Renge. A few things. All these meetings and outreach sessions and everything that you talked about, where people come together and talked about all this, were they advertised somewhere so people could, and where were they advertised?
Tara?
They were advertised through a number of means. So we were, depending on the type of outreach that we were doing, we had it always on our website. So that was advertised through, if we were holding neighborhood conversations with an organization, it was usually advertised through the organization to their membership or to others, as well as on our website. If we held 5 public listening sessions in all corners of the region. We noticed those through press releases in the paper. we had we shared memos with the communities that we were holding the event in, and we noticed it through our newsletter.
So were there any like meeting minutes and notes or
Yeah.
names of people that attended these or?
All right, let him finish and then. Are you finished, sir, with that?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, that's fine. Go ahead, Tara.
So the summary document of our outreach efforts is a summary of, that's basically every conversation that we had. There's a summary of the conversation. So there were minutes recorded for all of our topic-oriented workshops, our neighborhood conversations, our regional listening sessions. We also provided, I have a whole summary of every single comment that we received in a database, but we did a summary for the document itself. So if you turn to that document, you can see the record of all of the feedback that we received.
And where could I find this document?
It's on our website currently, so it's swrpc.org/regional plan. I have a few copies of CDs here today if you want to leave with one, but I'm happy to make a copy of a CD for you if need be.
Okay, thank you. And final, you were talking about expanding the array of housing options, yet you explain how the population is decreasing. So why are we expanding our housing options if we're having to treat, I know in Ringe alone, we have over 80 homes for sale in Ringe, they're not selling.
Yeah, that's a good logical question. What's the
Sure.
position with respect to that?
So we're not necessarily saying that we need to build more housing. The expanding the array of options really reflects the need for more flexible housing types. So in some communities, you're not allowed to have an in-law apartment or accessory dwelling unit in a certain zoning district. So we're encouraging towns to consider what options, options to allow for more flexible housing. So for instance, if a younger, the instance with our aging population, many older families live in 3 to 4 bedroom homes that are larger in size, that are over 30 years old and drafty. And so ensuring that we have a housing stock that accommodates their needs, that is one level that is accessible. So not necessarily building new units, but maybe modifying existing units or considering the modification of existing units or considering the ability to have an in-law apartment so that if younger generations, when they move here, have an option for renting, there isn't exactly, our rental market in the region isn't, it's limited. So having that opportunity for younger generations and a younger workforce to come. So if you read the document, my take on it is it's not proposing the development of more housing, but really the objective is diverse housing types. So not only single-family large homes, homes that allow for rental units, potentially homes that allow for an in-law apartment, homes that are handicapped accessible.
So would you be pushing for more mixed-use zoning types?
I mean, if by mixed use you mean housing in a village center that is near office space or housing that's near businesses or schools, yes.
Okay,
Good.
thank you.
All right, thank you very much for your comments. Other comments? Yes, ma'am. Over here.
Hi, Winnell Hamilton, Ringe, New Hampshire, and I've read most of the Monadnock futures there. And actually, who actually put that all together? Because I actually have a problem with page 7, and this one seems to be under the Monadnock Region Future Outreach Summary, and I believe it was under Natural Resources.
Look, this is page 7 of the plan.
Or the outreach summary.
Yeah.
Oh, the outreach summary.
That's,
Is it okay?
yeah.
Yeah, go
Monadnock
ahead,
Region
Tara.
Future
Maybe we'll take a look at it.
Outreach Summary.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks. What's your concern? What's your?
Yeah, what is it that you're asking about that?
Well, I mean, it goes through the job, tourism, infrastructure, but you get down to the socioeconomic.
Yeah.
And, I mean, who would write this? I mean, issues with pockets of poverty, divide between economic classes, the us versus them mentality. There's little room for the middle class in town. Most are either very rich or very poor. That's not true. I mean,
Oh, okay.
Could I comment?
Yeah, no, come on up here a little bit. Tara, I guess, just for everybody, so everybody's on the same page, It's page 7 of the Monadnock Region Future Outreach Summary. And the specific areas, there are a number of them: jobs, tourism, infrastructure. And this one in particular is socioeconomic. And underneath that, there are bullet points with respect to socioeconomic, as has just been indicated, issues with pockets of poverty, divide between economic classes. There's a list of them: need affordable places to eat and shop. So hold on one second. So those are the lists underneath it. And I think the question that you're asking is, you know, where did those come from?
Well, yes, because there's little room for the middle class. Most are either very rich or very poor. I mean, and it just goes on.
Okay,
That's
no,
not
I get
true.
it. Tara, so I understand. So
Okay.
your question is, you know, where did the comments come from with respect to the Monadnock Region Futures Outreach Summary? So can you address that?
So to be clear, for those not looking at the document, that comment specifically is in quotes because it was a quotation taken from a public participant of one of our outreach sessions. Actually, all of those lists, a prior comment was made as to whether we took minutes at those meetings. We did take minutes, and that summary is a reflection of the minutes taken at a summary of the comments. So it's not the Planning Commission saying those, or writing those bulleted items, it's what we heard from the public who participated in our events.
Oh, okay.
Good.
Thank you very much.
Yep,
But
so
there are a lot of,
Yeah.
Yep.
it doesn't make sense. I mean, even it goes into property taxes as well. So you're
Yes.
telling me that other people
Yes.
have said this?
Yes. Other people don't make sense.
Okay. What I'm saying is you took this information and you put it in this?
Well, no, we only, as far as I understand from Tara, what happened was we went out into the community and asked for comments, and comments that people made. We didn't want to censor people, you know, so comments that, well, we're not good to censor people. So comments that people were made were included in this, but this doesn't necessarily mean that the plan was drafted or not drafted towards a particular point of view. It was only to summarize for that. Go ahead,
Could I
Tara.
just do some follow-up?
Sure.
Also, the reason why we
Please.
placed...
Tara, you might want to stand up if
Sure.
you don't mind.
So the reason why that summary, that outreach summary is included in the document is for you to see what people did say, and to show you that we're tried not to put those comments in our own words. We used their words.
Good, thank you. Other comments, questions? Yes, ma'am. Oh, you first, go ahead.
Hi, Cheryl McCabe, Sharon from Ringe. Just a clarification, if you could talk a little bit about what a riparian corridor is.
Riparian?
Riparian is
Yep.
actually, I'm not familiar with
Yep,
it.
no, that's fine.
So if you
Yep.
talk a little bit about that, how that's all acquired, how big they are, and just in general.
Sure, Jim, who's best on to talk about that?
Tara,
Tara can do that?
Sure. So a riparian corridor, it's an environmental term. It's the area or the zone along a river or stream where vegetation is usually, but it can be of varying distances. It's a term to define that area along a river or stream.
So is there an average area? Are there these corridors in other parts of the United States currently?
Good.
Absolutely. It's not specific to the Monadnock region or to New Hampshire. It's global. And the size of riparian zones, if you will, are dependent on the size of the waterway. So if it's a wider waterway and transmitting a lot of flow, then it might end up being a larger area involved. If it's a much smaller trickling stream, then it's probably a very narrow riparian zone.
So could you define larger and narrower? Can you
So
give
I
us
guess
some
what an
examples?
example would be, like, the Connecticut River is a fairly large riparian corridor, right?
So, yeah, exactly. So you
And
would...
the Ashwillet is smaller.
Smaller, right.
Riparian. It's the course of the river or the waterway or something like that.
So if I may, it's not land, it's waterways?
Yes.
Or is it land?
Well, where?
It can be both, and so waterways will have an associated floodplain, and so, you know, you don't want to be building on the floodplain because you're liable to be washed out, so, you know, so the riparian area includes often the floodplain. So when it's used in this document, the reference is often, you know, the value of protecting the riparian area from development because we don't want to build in harm's way. Also, for environmental protection purposes, certain critters, bugs and bunnies, whatnot, like to be in those areas. That's their habitat.
So if I may, it's a very different picture, because I Googled it, and it took me to Santa Cruz, California, and huge masses of property were defined as these corridors. So if that in fact is, well, Google it.
No, I'm actually going to try
So if
that.
that-
But the word that you used first before riparian,
Beg your pardon?
you used the word first before.
Well, riparian, R-I-P-A-R.
Yeah, no,
My
I'm
apologies.
just, I'm Googling other words.
So I'm just wondering, for that corridor in California, how they come to acquire these mass pieces of property for these corridors. That's really basically my question.
Well, harder to speak to the California example, but my guess is through certain environmental consciousness and land conservation efforts, they've made a policy perhaps in that state to try to acquire as much riparian area as they can to protect for the future. And maybe in this particular example, it happens to be a fairly broad swath of property, of land.
Thank you very much.
Good,
Oh,
thank
did
you.
you have a comment? Go ahead.
Briefly, and not to continue this further, but I think we answered your question. However, there is no set environmental definition for the width of a riparian corridor. It really depends on the context of the landscape, and it depends on, as Tim mentioned, policy. Oftentimes that width is an arbitrary determination based on environmental characteristics or features in the area.
So, good, thank you. So the entire state of Mississippi is a riparian corridor.
Certainly by the
Yeah.
All right, further questions, comments?
I have one.
Before we go to somebody who's spoken first, yes, sir. Did you want to come up here? That'd be good.
All right. Art Bingham, right here in Keene. I have a couple of questions. My first is, what will be or would be the relationship between the regional planning plan that we have just witnessed, if it's passed, and each of the 34 master plans within the region? Is there a relationship?
First question, two.
So what is the relationship of this plan to
The individual master plans for each one of the members of communities.
The area.
Yeah, so as Tara pointed out in her presentation, part of our due diligence in coming up with what we would put into this document involved an inventory of all of our existing master plans within the towns in the region. After that, we put a document together. Once when it's available to communities, they can choose whether or not to borrow from it or to use it as a resource in any way, shape, or form to influence any modifications to their existing local master plans. It's completely up to the town.
Now, if they do decide to latch on, shall we say, to a portion of your plan, what's it gonna cost them? How do they go about it? How is that facilitated?
Well, there's really not a cost involved. When the plan is complete and available, we will make it available to the communities, and if they choose to use portions of it, they're free to do so. If they see something in there that they think might work for them, and they are interested in learning more, and they might need some technical assistance from us, they're free to call us. Our member towns pay us membership dues for that very purpose, so that we can then provide them with some guidance in interpreting how certain portions of the plan our plan that may look, I say our plan, it's their plan, it's everyone's plan, can then be used in their local plan.
All right, now, I'm still not clear on how this is to be approved. I understand it's the board, it's the regional board. It's not our individual town planning boards.
That's correct.
Now, no one on the regional board members are appointed, is that correct? They're not elected.
Yeah, go
How do they get there?
Okay,
Oh, with all due respect for you people
No,
sitting
that's
here.
fine, yeah. Nope, that's
I have
good.
nothing against any of you, but I would like to know how it's facilitated.
Real quickly, via New Hampshire state law that forms regional planning commissions, municipalities that choose membership have the ability to appoint delegates that are, we'll call them commissioners. Depending on the population of the community, depends on how many commissioners they can appoint. It's under 5,000, it's 2 commissioners. If it's, I'm sorry, under 10,000, it's 2 commissioners. If it's over 10,000, it's 3 commissioners. If it's over 25 thousand, it's 4 commissioners, and that's where it's maxed.
Okay.
The way a municipality, a town or city needs, is required by law to designate its commissioners is through a nomination from its planning board and confirmation through its board of selectmen.
All right, okay.
And
so
then go ahead.
From that set of commissioners of our member communities, on an annual basis, a subset of those are chosen to serve as members of this board of directors.
Basically, the nominations are placed before the commission itself, the overall commission, and then they're voted on at the annual commission meeting. So that's
Just
all.
one further question,
Sure.
and it's related. So really, the only input the public has already been expressed, right? From surveys referred to by Tara, certain meetings, you've already gotten your feelings from the public as to what they like about their town, what they don't like, what could be improved. All that sort of thing is really the only input that will be given prior to a vote of the board, of this unelected board. So my point is, my concern is that the public in this planning has not had a fair shake. I really think much of this should go before a public vote.
Well, this is a public vote. We're a public body, you know, and all of the meetings that were open below were noticed to the public. Minutes were kept of those meetings. I mean, this is a public process, just like a planning board process, a board of selectmen process, a city council process. I mean, this is a public action. People are here, people
Well,
are
I
expressing.
understand, or we wouldn't be here because we probably wouldn't even know about it. But I'm looking for as much transparency as we can get. And it's only been recently that I even knew about this meeting. I don't know about other people, but it didn't seem to be widely publicized. But I don't mean to dwell on this. I just want, it's important that the elected officials, our old officials from counties, not regions, they were elected. And so if we didn't like something they were doing in office, we had a chance to go to them and express our opinion. And if they didn't do anything about it in the next election, they were out of a job. So we seem to be getting away from that with regionalism, if I'm understanding the picture correctly, seeing the picture correctly. And just tell me if I'm wrong.
No, that's just not wrong, and it's not an issue of debate, but keep in mind that ultimately, most people who volunteer and sit on even public bodies feed back to an individual or an entity or a group that is an elected body. And ultimately, even if it's not a directly elected body, those individuals, there are a lot of communities that have subcommittees and ad hoc committees and people from the public that come in, and the transfer station group over in Peterborough or wherever you want to have it. And even though those individuals aren't directly elected by the population, they're appointed by people who are directly elected by the population. So I appreciate your comment, but ultimately, most everybody in this room flows back to either an individual or an entity, generally, that is an elected public body. So
All right, fair enough.
if for some reason, people aren't happy about that, there is recourse through that election process.
Well, I know our local planners and select board people are voted on by us. And okay.
Right, exactly.
And and to a degree, you've taken it to the next step.
Yeah, well, and we're still responsible to those individuals and to the members of the public that we represent. I think everybody here takes that very seriously. We still have those responsibilities.
Thank you for your
Good.
time.
All right, thank you. Other comments for the first time before I go around again? Yes, yes, ma'am? First time comment?
Hi, my name is Patricia Rodriguez. I'm from Westmoreland. And just a little comment more about the participation. All the little bitty towns that were supposed to be in these conversations, I know in my own town, we have no communication at all. There's you're lucky if there's something posted on the door at the town hall, and that's it. There's no newsletter. There was no any other way. So I did not know when you had your neighborhood conversations. And there were none in my neighborhood, they were in other neighborhoods in my area. And the 4 conversations that did take place, according to what I looked online, they were all within about a 4-month period, and this has been a 3-year project. So I don't see how a lot of input has really been gotten from the public. And you said 500 people out of how many people that live in these 34 communities? What would be the estimate of that population?
Over 100,000.
So 500 people out of 100,000 does not really seem like a representative sample to me. But like you said,
Sorry, the first thought that came to my mind when you said that, and I understand it's really difficult sometimes to get public participation. I think in the last election cycle, we had the lowest voter turnout in history, essentially, so, you have to wonder about that sometimes, there's no doubt about it.
yeah, I'm not saying it's your fault.
No, I get
I'm just
that.
saying
I
that
appreciate what you're saying,
it's not your
that's what I'm
fault. It's just
saying.
that, is it really what you're saying it is? I don't know.
No, I understand. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
And also, so you're going to, this is a draft plan, and you're going to vote to adopt it or not. But being that it's a draft that you're adopting, does that mean that there is going to be another opportunity for input as a draft form before a final form comes from the draft?
Well, we're going to discuss that a little bit at the end of the evening. I mean, we have some possibilities associated with it. Now, the board hasn't taken an action here yet, so I'm sort of hesitant to speak on anybody's behalf. But I think part of the purpose here is to take the public comments that we hear. We've heard some good suggestions here this evening. And I think that, it's incumbent upon the board and the staff to consider those before we take some action. So that's a preview, I think, of where I may be going when we go into the board discussions at this point. But go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, because if it's going to be adopted and there isn't any more input, then it really isn't a draft if it's the final form already. But anyhow, now you said that towns can or cannot belong to the Regional Planning Commission. So that reflects a lot as to how much you actually help them, say if there is a regional project underway. If a project involves, several towns and whatnot, but some of them participate, pay your fee and participate, and some don't, how does that, come up, what happens to your input to that project if you're notified of a project, but the towns don't pay the fee and don't belong to you?
Tim, do you want to go?
Well, I'm trying to make sure I understand the question.
I think I understand the question. I mean, keep in
They
mind.
have to pay a fee.
No, you keep in mind that the plan itself, as we've talked about here tonight, doesn't require a community to do anything at all. If a community or several communities wanted to implement something in the plan that required cross-community cooperation, which can happen, then those communities would have to decide amongst themselves how they were going to structure that. What Tim was saying is there are some members in our region, most of the towns are members. How many?
30 of our 34 towns.
Towns are
choose
members.
membership.
So the membership fee in that context is, let's say that 3 of 4 towns wanted to come together and implement something that they saw in the plan that would be cross-town wise. The 4th town isn't a member of the commission. So the 3 towns that were members of the commission, because they paid membership dues, if they had questions with respect to the implementation or interpretation of the plan, they could come to us. The 4th town, technically, they wouldn't be able to do that, but if they're involved in a coalition with 3 other towns that are members and they wanted to put this together, they would benefit from that as well. So it's not something that the towns are required to do. And the membership fee is essentially in order to participate with our staff and have the commission staff assist them in implementing this, if they want it.
But basically, you wouldn't really be assisting a town that didn't pay the fee, but you would assist ones that did. That's the way you operate.
I suppose there is a benefit to non-member towns that we are doing work for that's paid from some other entity. So a non-member town could look at the results of this document. They had nothing to do with the preparation of this document, but make use of the data. But if you were to contact the staff and say, help us make use of it, we'd have to say, well, I'm sorry, you're a non-member.
Okay. I don't think I have any other comments that I wrote down. So I didn't get to read the whole plan. I only read the section that had to do with my particular area, the New Hampshire 12 North Corridor. I didn't read the whole, everything else yet, but I know that obviously you're trying to get towns to cooperate on things about transportation and stewardship of natural resources, and that's why, because I just did learn of this, like the other gentleman said, really just within the last few weeks. I haven't had time to dig into it very much. It would be nice that people would have input even after you supposedly vote on it and accept it or not as a draft. That's something that I would like to put forth as something that you consider.
We're considering those comments right now, as a matter of fact. That's what the public hearing context
I
is.
guess that's all I have.
Good, all right, thank you very much. Good comments. Well, you were first, oh, no, first time.
Excuse me, no problem. Chuck Weed, and I'd just like to point out that there are a couple of elected officials here listening to this, hoping they can learn from it. My question is, do I understand planning documents correctly? That they provide general guidelines and that they are there to be iterated and reiterated and iterated and reiterated. In other words, they don't commit people to anything in specific unless they choose to follow through. That's my
Right.
That, for this plan, that is the case.
That's correct. Well, first, oh, you haven't spoken yet, right? No, yes, go right ahead.
I have a couple questions. Kellen Geiger from Ringe. First, could you please tell me how many pages that is total?
Just the plan itself?
No, the whole draft. Everything that is on the website as far as from the top to beginning. I know that some of them are, one was like I thought 70-some pages, one 100. Do you know what the total number of pages is in that?
I think we'd have to look.
I can't give the exact amount without totaling them.
But keeping in mind that the plan itself is 92 pages long, 91, I guess, on this draft.
Yeah.
Oh, they're 180 pages because it's double-sided.
No, you're right. It's
It is? Oh, they've doubled it up that way. So 92 pages that. Now, most of the other documents that are attached, these are other documents, and Tara, correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, some of them are created for other purposes. The Comprehensive Economic Development Plan, you know, and so on and so on, the broadband plan, and some of these plans are prepared either as a result of requests from the state or statutory requirements and that kind of thing. So it wasn't the whole thing.
But this is part of what you're going to vote on, is everything that is here?
Yes,
Yes.
but I think
Okay.
everything else we already.
All right, because I have read, it was only available online for about, I would say less than a month. I did the best I could to go through it and read through it, but I never really got a chance to really study it. I'd like to know if all the members have read all of that. If you could tell me if each of you have
Oh,
read
I'm
all
going
of
to
it.
admit to you right up the top, I haven't read every.
So you haven't read
Of course not.
something you're going to vote on?
I have not read every single line in the plan. I've read a lot of the plan. We're already familiar with almost all of the other plans. Read the comprehensive economic, the SEDS plan, you know, the other ones. Many of these documents are documents that we deal with year in and year out here. So
Well,
it's
I'm
not-
just saying, I took the time to look at those documents online, but did not get a chance to study them. And I think maybe you should all take a little more time to know exactly what's in there before you vote on it, that's all.
Fair enough. Thank you very much. Oh, fair enough. Other comments? First time, anybody first time? You have already spoke, yeah, second time. You were the first second timer, so, all right.
Couple of quick points. First of all, I want to echo something of what Art Bingham said and this lady over here said. It seems to me that if you want public participation, even though I recognize that a lot of selectmen's meetings and everything else, you practically get none. The fact is, you can publicize it. WKBK right here in Keene runs public service advertisements all the time. There are all kinds of programs, they're always looking for someone to talk about. I'm a political junkie. I go to everything. So bottom line is, somehow, I missed a lot of this, because I'd certainly have been happy to provide input. No problem there. So that's for what that's worth, but I would encourage you to do that. Second, you get membership dues from the various towns. I understand that. But you're funded, maybe just on a one-time basis, I don't know, from the Department of Transportation. Well, what percentage of your funding comes from the towns? In other words, you get 25% of your funding from the town, or 2%?
No, it's in between. So it varies from year to year. It typically is around 10% of the total operating budget is paid for by membership dues through the towns.
Okay, but the towns that don't choose to join are not really free riding, because the federal government's already sent them a check, or sent you guys funding, in effect.
Okay, but
So their tax dollars are going there anyway.
For every federal contract we're involved with, there is a requirement for match, a local match. A portion of the total needs to be paid by those of us who reside in this region.
When you say a federal contract, I didn't know you had any contracts.
We do.
With whom?
You just mentioned some federal agencies. You mentioned the DOT.
Okay, all right, I see. I'm sorry. I was under the impression that you had an ongoing relationship with those organizations that funded your operation.
They depend upon whether or not we can contract with them, and sometimes there are contracts and sometimes there aren't. Sometimes it's the federal government through the Department of Transportation. It may be Homeland Security with respect to...
Okay, so that varies and it all depends.
Absolutely.
I think you're referring to the three agencies that funded the planning process that we're discussing today.
That may be what I'm referring to. You flashed three of them up there on the side of the screen, and looked to me like, quite frankly, if in fact you were being well funded by those organizations, by those departments, then I'd be inclined to suggest to my town that we save the money, because frankly, we're short.
The reality there is that whether we get funded or not from year to year this is like any other public, semi-public, non-profit organization. You're always wondering where the next contracting process is going to come from. And keep in mind that the entities are set up under state law, under the statute. Membership, they don't have to be members. But if communities of the regional planning commissions wish to be members, they get some benefit for it, whether or not we get the contract from the federal government or not.
Okay.
That's the point.
All right, and for what it's worth, I am an elected official.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Good. Thank you.
Okay.
Yep. Further ones for the second time, right here.
Thank you. Dan Cartwright again, Alstead. Okay, your funding, according to the presentation, was from the Sustainable Communities Initiative?
Yes.
Yes.
HUD.
HUD. Because I know the Sustainable Communities Initiatives that some towns had adopted under a Granite State Future had some things attached to it that loses local control. So because they can have, it includes the final interpretation of the study. They have the final say on a lot of things, so you lose local control. There's a
Well, let's ask on that question then, because you basically asked a question at this point. Let's get the answer to that. So the question, I think, is, I understand it is, as a result of the funding that we received through this process, do they have any control, they being the funding source, with respect to the outcomes that occurred or how this may be implemented? Tim?
There is no ability to usurp local control through this document. It is an advisory document. The only control that HUD has on us is that we will produce a product.
Okay.
They have no say in what the fundamental content of that product is, other than you'll cover these areas.
And just to clarify for everybody else's benefit too, and also that there's no requirement that this be pushed down into the communities for them to adopt or not adopt, is that correct?
It is not a top-down, it's If anything, it's a bottom-up because we asked our communities for input.
All right, good, thank you. Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
Okay, so what you're saying is the communities will not be asked to adopt this?
No.
That's what I'm
Okay,
saying.
now my next question is, do you help communities acquire grants?
At times,
Okay, such as was done with the Sustainable Community Initiative?
no.
No, okay. Who was responsible for offering the towns to sign on for those grants?
I think we're gonna say that that's outside of our purview. We didn't do it, so
Okay.
you'd have to go to those towns and ask them.
Okay, okay, so, but you do go to towns and say there are these grants available, that if you apply, there, you could have the possibility of getting this grant to do A, B, and C.
Generally, the process is somebody will come to us, but so-
It's more that the
They
towns
come
will
to us.
but there are times when we will inform towns about the availability of funds that could help them do their hazard mitigation planning, for example, that could help them build a senior housing or a Head Start center through some support, as long as they, meet certain criteria.
Okay, now my next question, since the Sustainables Community, and I understand you didn't do it, had requirements that were not presented
Ma'am, I'm not
to
even,
the selectmen.
that's way beyond the purview of this particular document.
No.
We already don't have any connection with the Sustainable Communities grant process. None of us here know anything about
Well,
it.
you got a grant from them.
Do we?
Well, actually, we got one indirectly through our sister agency, the Nashville Region Planning Commission, who on behalf of the state of New Hampshire applied to HUD's Sustainable Communities Initiative for funding that allowed us the resource to be able to undertake preparing
So
this.
it came
plan.
in through Nashua?
That's correct.
All right. So my suggestion, I guess, would be to go to the National Planning Commission and talk to them about this.
Yes, everything comes through Nashua. Nashua is the one that signed on to be the lead for this kind of thing within the state of New Hampshire. And it has, I would warn everyone that there are things that when you sign on to something that sounds wonderful, that the federal government has their stipulations, and you've got to do tremendous amount of research to get the original documents, of which I have one of the Sustainable Communities Initiative, that shows what you're signing up for and what you're giving away. And you're giving away control and of the towns and the individual property owners.
Man, that's duly noted. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. But just to reiterate, this plan, if you want to adopt it or not, certainly up to you. So, first, did you have your hand up, ma'am? I thought no, okay, because I was going to say you had a first comment. Yes, sir, your first comment. Go ahead.
So, my name is Al Lepletinier. I reside in Ringe. I'm a civil engineer, a professional civil engineer, and I'm not going to be voting on this. But I'd like to hear the qualifications that the voters here have. If we could just go around the...
Sir, I'm not going to get into that. We haven't, sir, we have been appointed for whatever reason through the process. People like it or they don't. We have a statutory process that we follow. We have a plan in front of us that we're going to approve. I'm not a civil engineer. I'm not an environmentalist. I'm not a city planner. I'm not a town planner. Most of us aren't to some extent. We have been requested to consider this process and to vote on it or not. I'm not going to request people to go around the table and state their qualifications. Do you have some other question that you'd like to ask?
Yeah, I think the next time you have an open meeting, you should advertise it and have it like in the way afternoon and put it on Saturday, so everyone could come.
Duly noted. Thank you for that comment. Thank you.
Good luck.
Yep, thank you. Second time. Yes, sir.
Well, Greg Butko from Richmond. Somebody brought up a term which I'm not familiar with regarding land that's adjacent to a waterway.
Riparian.
Yes, and I'm wondering if that's synonymous with what they used to call wetlands.
Everybody here except for the people who know anything about wetlands are shaking their head. Who wants to take that? Tara?
I mean, in the sense that it could be a wetland, but it's not a wetland per se.
Well, is it the same legal terminology?
No.
Because wetlands, as defined by the federal government, they find an endangered mosquito or something on private property, and they stop anybody from whatever they wanted to do on their property, and in some cases not even being able to walk on their property. So I just want to bring that to everybody's attention, that if this is one of the things
It is not.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Other comments for the second time? All right, not seeing any. Thank you all very much for coming this evening. We do appreciate the comments that you've made. You can stay. Feel free to stay, and feel free to, listen. What we're going to do now, at this point, there are no other comments. The public hearing process and comment period was noticed as of to close prior to the public hearing for written comments. Is that correct, Tara?
Yes, at the end of the day yesterday.
Yeah, at the end of the day yesterday. So the written comment period is closed. However, this public hearing process was intended to provide additional information to the board to consider with respect to drafting or approving a final plan. And we're going to take those into consideration. At this point, I'm going to close the public hearing process. That's like the official slam, they tell you to do that. So the public hearing process at this point is closed. What the board is going to do at this point is to sort of deliberate what we've heard and any other questions or comments that the board may have with respect to staff before we get into talking about the document itself. I know I asked that earlier before we went into the public comment period. There weren't any. I'm just curious as to whether at this point, after we've heard everything, whether the board has any specific comments for the staff at this point in connection with the document. Not seeing any, then we'll have a discussion with respect to this. What are people thinking at this point? What's the sort of the sense of the body at this point? Well, let me tell you what. Well, go ahead.
I'll start.
Yep.
The document itself, I mean, the staff and what they put together as an advisory tool, again, I think it's going to be important that we discern it to the towns, then the municipality can look at it so they can see this information. I know as a past selectman, that type of information, when you look at what the comments of communities are and the demographics and the data that's in that document, it could be an eye-opener to some communities. And some of those scenarios and strategies can be used by those, if they so choose. The document, staff did a fantastic job. I mean, the information is easy to read, and it's compiled. I think, fantastic job. I just wanted everybody to know that as part of the Monadnock Futures Advisory Committee, the meetings that we had and input from staff was a good give and take, and the information that we received was something that I'll remember.
I'll just reiterate that as well. I appreciated the time that the outreach. I was able to sit on the leadership, and as well as I am an elected official in Chesterfield. I look forward to being able to present this to the community. I think if anything, even if we're able to take that, read it, and come up with something different, I mean, it just gives you a broader perspective, makes you think outside the box, and that's what we need to do. So I appreciate everybody's efforts, and all of you guys coming. It's all important, because it takes a community to build a community, and we all know where we're at. We've got to somehow move forward positively.
Other comments?
So,
yep.
Yeah, so I'll just make a comment that, I guess in the same support of, there's pieces that maybe none of us, collectively agree with 100%. There's pieces that we really are passionate about and we like. But I feel really strongly that, the document really summarizes the spirit of this region. And so that's what our job here is to summarize the spirit of, kind of the overall community. It may not be right, specific for an individual, or there may be certain flaws here or there, but I feel really good that it does summarize the spirit of the community. And then the next goal is it goes to the individual towns, and they decide, does this reflect the spirit of our individual town? Do we want to adopt it, or are there just parts of it that we want to adopt and other parts that we want to ignore? So
Yeah, I think that's important, that the document itself, I don't think any town is gonna adopt it as it is. They're gonna take pieces out of it that are gonna fit them, because there's parts of it that just don't fit given communities. And, put parts of it in their master plan so they can plan for the future, for, transportation or environmental or, open space strategies and things like that. I think it's a good start, to, look forward to the future.
Other comments? Yes.
I have some concerns that reflect some of the comments we received about public notice. And as someone who's been on the planning board and other community groups in my area, I know that you can do your very best to get the word out. Things can be legally noticed, you can go to community groups and make presentations, you can be on the radio, you can be in the newspaper, and angry people will still come to you and say, why didn't I hear about this? So I think it behooves us, as we go forward with this process or other processes, to think as widely as we can about bringing publicity to the effort early and continuously as we go along.
Other comments?
Good.
Yes.
I think the public ought to know that this board has been appraised of every step along the way that the staff has made to keep us informed as to what comments have been received and how things are being put together and some of the ideas that are being presented. So it's not something that's been put together in a dark room and it rolls in and put on the table like they do down in Washington. But we as a board have been informed as it progressed.
Other comment? The comment that I'm going to make is, I just spoke to Tim while people are looking. We do have an obligation under the statute to take the draft, to have the public hearing, to consider the comments that are made at the public hearing, and to determine whether or not the document should be revised for some reason. Personally, what I'm going to be suggesting is, I at least would like a copy of the minutes after they're prepared, so I can read through them again. I mean, when you're running the hearing or when you're participating in the hearing, it's hard to assimilate all of the comments that are made. Personally, I would like to be able to take the minutes, to read the minutes, to look through the document again, and to determine whether or not we think that as a board there are areas that may need to be tweaked. As you heard me earlier in connection with one of the comments about apprenticeships, that's near and dear to my heart, and I don't know whether we should or could or something that should go into the document with respect to that, but I definitely would prefer if the board were willing to allow us each the opportunity to do that. According to Tim, there's no particular time constraint on this. I think it's fair to the people who have come tonight that we do give their comments, the due consideration that is necessary, and that we do have an opportunity to process them ourselves before we make a determination as to whether or not to change the plan or adopt the plan. So I'm going to be sort of requesting that. Yeah, Tuss?
So probably you would be asking to defer a vote?
Exactly, until the next board meeting. And then, oh, thank you. All right, there's a motion, moving second to defer to the next board meeting with the understanding that Becky will get the minutes out. We'll have a chance to take a look at the minutes and then discuss further at the next meeting. Yes?
Before we vote, what time constraints do we have?
By contract, we are required to present the plan prior to the end of December 31st to our governing body, and that's what we've done.
So there is no time constraint that it has to be finalized by December 31st or January 14th? Okay, that's all I want.
So a motion on the floor and seconded. Any further discussion? So just so everybody's clear, the motion would be to defer the action until the next board meeting, and we'll come together at that point. Everybody understand? Excuse me, sir, I'm sorry. We'll get to that in a second. So at the next board meeting, everybody understand that? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Good, thank you. And we'll announce for the next board meeting. At this point, Tim, we're going to keep it on the usual schedule. We have to finish our agenda. So what I'd like to do at this point, thank you all very much for coming. We are going to finish our regular agenda, which we suspended for the public hearing process. Did that, public comments. Just before everybody leaves, in case they want to hear, the next meeting of the Planning Commission is scheduled when, Becky? January 13th. Here at 3 o'clock.
That's a public hearing?
No, it's not a public hearing, it's just a meeting of the board.
Which is a public meeting.
It's a public meeting, yes, public meeting, the public can come, but it's not a public hearing, okay?
Okay.
Good.